Hello and welcome. We're going to be taking a look at chapter 25 today. Specifically, we're going to be looking at World War I. So the reason why World War I comes about is some of the things we looked at in previous chapters, and there's four main causes that we see. The first is imperialism. This idea of conquering other countries, it's going to create a lot of tension between the European countries, right? So they're neighbors with each other in Europe, now they're neighbors with each other in Africa, in Asia, and again, the tensions are going to rise. The next major reason we see is nationalism, or this idea that our country is superior to your country. Again, it's perfectly fine to think your country's great. It's not fine to think your country's great and you should conquer every other country to make them like you. The other issue we see is internal problems with some of these empires. They have so many nationalities, all of these nationalities want their own independence. Next major issue we find is militarism. These countries are continuing to grow their armies, right, through conscription or a draft. Again, if you create a giant army, if you spend millions of dollars making this army, you eventually want to use it for something. And the last major reason is alliances. Again, what could have been a small conflict between two countries becomes a world war because every single country is now dragged into the conflict because they're associated with one of those two countries. So again, those are the four main causes we see of World War I. So let's talk about why this starts. It goes back into the Balkans. It's where we left off in chapter 24. Serbia is still trying to expand, still trying to create this pan-Slavic empire of all similar countries in this region. Austria-Hungary is not going to allow them to do this. They consider that their territory. They want Serbia small. So again, we have tension between those two countries. Now, within Serbia, there is a terrorist organization called the Black Hand. They decide it's going to be a good idea to assassinate the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. So again, he's kind of next in line for the crown. So while the Archduke is visiting the city of Sarajevo, he is assassinated. So again, this is not in Serbia. This is not a Serbian-sanctioned assassination. The country of Serbia literally has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter to Austria-Hungary, right? This terrorist organization is from their country. They're responsible. So Austria-Hungary gives them an ultimatum. You need to do X, Y, and Z or else we're going to attack you. For the most part, Serbia was game. They're like, okay, we can do this, we can do this. But there were just some things on the list that were absurd. If Serbia had given into every single one of these demands, the country of Serbia basically wouldn't exist. It would have become a satellite state of Austria-Hungary. So again, there were some things that they balked on, they just simply couldn't do. Austria-Hungary takes it as a sign of war. We gave you an ultimatum, we gave you a chance to avoid conflict, we are now going to attack you. And this really kind of sets in motion World War I. Because once Serbia is threatened, Russia, who considers itself the protector of Serbia, begins to move their armies. Again, we're not attacking, we're not shooting it, we're just simply moving our troops closer to where the conflict might happen. But the second that Russia mobilizes their troops, Germany now has to mobilize their troops. Because again, Austria-Hungary is their friend. So if Russia is moving to attack them, ergo, Russia is moving to attack Germany. So again, Germany begins to move their troops. All right, now, Austria-Hungary is under the impression at this point in time that Germany is going to back them no matter what. And it's referred to as the blank check. So essentially, again, paraphrasing, Germany says, Austria-Hungary, do whatever you need to do to kind of handle this. Austria-Hungary's like, well, that must mean we're able to go to war, and Germany's definitely going to have our back. Again, a war between Russia and Austria-Hungary may not go well for Austria, but if Germany's on their side, they feel very confident they can win. So again, Austria-Hungary is operating under the impression that Germany's going to back them, and that really influences how they behave. All right, so again, Austria-Hungary mobilizes their military to attack Serbia. Russia mobilizes their military to protect Serbia. Germany then has to mobilize their military to back Austria-Hungary, who might be getting attacked by Russia. And again, at this point in time, any of these countries could have simply have stepped back and said, pump the brakes here. This is a terrible idea. Like, we're going to war, and for what reason? Yes, somebody was assassinated. Serbia technically had nothing to do with it, and they're still willing to kind of pay reparations over this. Maybe we need to come up with a better solution. But again, going back to our four major causes of the war, that's simply not going to happen. Now, Germany knows that if they're going to fight a war, right, they need to be the aggressor. That they're surrounded by enemies because of the alliance system. All right, so even though no one has officially been attacked, or Austria-Hungary has only attacked Serbia, Germany is going to head and be preemptive. So on August 1st, they declare war on Russia. So even though Russia has not declared war on Germany, even though Russia has never actually physically attacked Germany in any way, shape, or form, Germany goes ahead and declares war on Russia because now they can justify attacking Russia. They're at war with each other. But remember, Russia is allies with France. So if you're declaring war on Russia, you're also declaring war on France because of the alliance system. Now, Germany has already planned for this. Like every country in the world, they have a contingency plan. If we go to war, how can we win this war? And Germany's plan is called the Schlieffen Plan. And what it calls for is a minimal attack against Russia, but the vast majority of German troops are going to attack France. Again, we want to get to them as quickly as possible with as much force as possible. We knock France out of the war, then we go ahead and deal with Russia. But there's a catch to this plan. In order to get to France, they have to go through Belgium. Now, every country in Europe had signed a document guaranteeing Belgium neutrality. Nobody was ever allowed to touch Belgium. So Germany's like, hey, Belgium, mind if we drive through your country to France? And Belgium's like, hey, no, we really do mind. That's not cool. And Germany's like, gonna do it anyways. So the second that they invade Belgium to get to France, now Great Britain's going to get involved. Again, Great Britain was allies with Russia and France, but they weren't really interested in fighting with them. Again, this wasn't really their battle. But now that Belgian neutrality has been violated, Great Britain is going to get in on the war. And again, now we've created this giant world war. So looking at World War I, kind of the early years, 1914, 1915. First off, everyone assumes that the war is going to be super quick, right? Wars in Europe throughout the 1900s were very fast, lasting a month, a couple months. The two sides fight, one guy wins, everyone just goes home. So again, everyone's kind of in a good mood going into this. What we find is that it becomes a stalemate, right? We got the trench warfare, nobody's really able to make any progress, and that's basically where it's going to be in France for the next 4 years. Over on the Eastern Front with Russia, we do see a lot more movement. We see kind of larger battles. We see victories, a little bit more troop movement, that kind of stuff. Again, Russia attacks Germany. It doesn't really go all that well when they attack Germany. They are pretty successful when they're attacking the Austrians. The Austrians attack Serbia. So again, we do have a little bit more conflict going on in the East. By the time we get into 1916, 1917, the trenches have basically prevented any kind of movement on the Western Front, right? The second anyone even puts their head up out of a trench, you're getting shot at, machine guns, snipers. So again, with modern technology, with the ability to rapid fire with guns and all this stuff, again, it's really a very deadly battle. And a great example of this is the Battle of Verdun. The two sides in this conflict lose 700,000 soldiers just in one battle alone. So again, almost 750,000 people die in just one battle. So again, with this advances in technology, it really creates a very deadly war. Now, again, we know that this is a world war. This is not just a European thing. So one thing we see is that the Ottoman Empire joins in with kind of these central powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, which now gives Britain the justification to attack the Ottomans. Again, they want access to the Ottoman Empire. They want to divide it up. They want to conquer some of those lands, and now they have a justifiable reason to attack. But interestingly enough, the first British attack on the Ottoman Empire is not incredibly successful. At Gallipoli, the British kind of stormed the beaches. They're repulsed. Thousands of British soldiers die. Also, throughout kind of the world, we see fighting in Africa as the different colonial powers kind of fight with themselves there. And we also see world soldiers participating in Europe, right? France uses a lot of African troops. Great Britain is going to use troops from Australia, New Zealand, India. Japan eventually joins the war with the Allies, mostly because they want to take over German colonies throughout the Pacific. Eventually, the U.S. gets involved as well. One of the reasons why is that we're constantly shipping supplies only to the Allies. So again, we're not helping Germany in any way, shape, or form. We're simply sending supplies to France. We're sending supplies to Great Britain. So Germany's like, hey, if you're going to help our enemies, we're going to start sinking your ships. All right, so they begin sinking our ships, which we obviously do not enjoy. They sink the Lusitania, which had 128 Americans on it. Germany does back off. They say, all right, we don't want to make America mad, so they stop it for a while. But then Germany encourages Mexico to attack us to kind of keep America busy, so we stop getting involved in European affairs. Germany eventually starts sinking U.S. merchant ships again. Finally, America declares war on Germany. But again, this isn't until April of 1917. At that point, the war has been raging for almost 3 years, and we're really not going to send troops to Europe until the summer of 1918. So again, it's still going to be almost a full year before we really see Americans participating in the conflict in Europe. One of the things we do see during the war, whether it be in America, whether it be in European countries, is male conscription. Again, you need as many soldiers as possible, so you're going to draft these soldiers into the military. You're also going to see the nationalization of factories, right? So again, things that were privately owned are now going to be taken over by the government. And again, they're going to be ran by the government. Anything they produce is going to be given to the government. We see laws passed not only in European countries, but also here in America that make it illegal to badmouth the government. Basically, in times of war, all right, you must kind of support your country. Here in America, it's called the Alien and Sedition Act. We also see women going into these factories. Again, as men are being drafted, as they're being forced into military service, we see women playing a more prominent role in the production of supplies in America. And one of the positive events that comes from this is a lot of countries passed women's suffrage laws after World War I, basically as a thank you. You stepped up, you helped us win the war. This is kind of our way of showing our thanks for that, is allowing people to vote. Now, back in Europe, what we see is that Russia is suffering heavily. Again, people in the country are starving. The military is defeated again and again and again. And we start to see a lot of backlash in Russia for even getting involved in this conflict. By March of 1917, we see major protests, which the Tsar has the military put down. But again, when the military puts it down, civilians are going to end up dead, which makes people freak out about the Tsar even more. Eventually, the Tsar realizes nobody wants him in charge, and he actually abdicates the throne. He steps down. And Russia actually does become a democracy for a little bit of time. But you have these competing groups trying to be in charge. Again, the Tsar wasn't overthrown by one specific person or one specific group. He basically just steps down, and Russia becomes incredibly chaotic. And in this chaos, V.I. Lenin and his Bolsheviks rise up in April, and they really kind of take charge of the country. And one of the reasons why they're so appealing is they promise to end the war, they promise to redistribute land, and they promise to turn the factories over to the masses. So again, they're going to be communally owned, and theoretically everyone's going to make money off of those profits. So again, this becomes extremely popular. The one thing they do as they take power, though, they do genuinely get Russia out of the war. So again, this allows Russia to kind of get out of the war, but now Russia breaks into a civil war. You have the Red Army, which is the communists, fighting the White Army, which are the anti-communists, and America actually does get involved a bit on the whites side there. It's also during this time that the royal family, who's in kind of being held captive by the communists, are actually executed. So again, all the members of the royal family are killed to make sure that no one kind of tries to put them back in charge. All right, back into 1918 here, Germany launches a new attack on the west, so France. Again, they don't have to fight Russia anymore. They can take all those Russian troops, move them over to France. They make some progress. All right, they push through. They get near Paris. But again, it's going to be stopped mainly because we have so many more American troops there now. Over 1 million Americans are in France. It's simply too many people for Germany to overcome. Germany is going to start to retreat, and Germany asks for peace. Now, what Germany is told is that there will be no peace as long as Wilhelm II is running the country. Again, everyone points to him as the guy that started this war, and if he's running your country, we're not going to make peace with you. So he does resign, he steps out, he goes out of power, and on November 11th, an armistice is called. Basically, both sides agree to stop shooting at each other. One important note, though, Germany does not consider that they lost the war. Again, they weren't defeated militarily. They might not have won militarily, but they weren't defeated militarily. And a lot of that is going to play into what we see 30 years down the line with World War II coming. All right? So, what are the effects of World War I? 8 to 9 million soldiers are going to end up dead because of this conflict. So again, that's a huge quantity of men that die, which directly then leads to a drop in birth rates. Obviously, there are less men. There are going to be less children being born. Any of the men that are still alive were off in the front fighting. So again, you're going to see a complete dip in the populations of Europe, not only because of the number of people dead, but simply that no one's having children at this point in time as well. Also, we see some very tragic events going on, specifically over in Turkey, which was the Ottoman Empire at the time. We see a genocide against the Armenian minority within that country. So again, lots of obviously the war aspect, but then kind of attacking civilians as well, something that was very common in World War I. All right, so now the war is over, we have to come up with a peace settlement. So what you have is what they call the Big Four, the leaders of Great Britain, Italy, France, and America. And they're basically going to dictate the terms of the peace. Our own President Woodrow Wilson shows up in Paris to kind of work on this peace agreement with what he calls the 14 points. All right, and it's his plan to end the war and ideally to prevent any kind of a war like this from ever happening again. Now, one of the 14 points, one of the things he thinks is going to help is the idea of self-determination. That individual minority groups should get to be their own country. right? Don't make them live under the yoke of some other government that they don't like, they don't want to be part of. So again, if we create a bunch of small countries throughout Europe, they're going to be happier, they're going to be less likely to go to war. But keep in mind that this self-determination only applies to European countries. Nobody is advocating that African countries get independence or that Asian countries get independence. Only that European minority groups should get some level of independence. Now, one of the reasons why this peace agreement is very slow and isn't very effective is that everyone is there for a different reason, right? So Britain and France consider Germany the starter of the war. They're there specifically to punish Germany. They want to ruin Germany's life. Italy is there, and they got kind of in late on the war. They weren't necessarily all that helpful, but they're on the winning side, and they expect something out of it. So they're expecting to get territorial gains. They want property for having been on the winning side. And again, America's there to prevent future wars. We don't want to have to get involved in a conflict like this again in the future. So again, everyone's there with a different point of view, a different goal, which makes it very kind of a slow process and very haphazard. The end result is they basically sit Germany down and say, here are your options, right? You can either sign this document saying you did in fact start World War I, or we're going to invade your country. All right. Now again, Germany's not a big fan of this. In Germany's eyes, they didn't start World War I, but they're going to go ahead and sign this anyways. But one of the agreements in this guilty clause that they have to sign is that they now have to pay reparations. All right, so again, each country that fought against them can literally give them a bill. Here's how much money it costs to fight against you in World War I. You're now responsible for paying that. And it equals hundreds of millions of dollars. Just an astronomical amount that there's no way Germany's going to be able to pay back anytime soon. Additionally, they lose physical territory in Europe, and they lose their colonies overseas. So again, if they were even going to make enough money to pay anyone back, that would have been what they needed, right? The area to produce products in Europe, the colonies to be able to kind of get natural resources from, but they lose all of that, and they owe everyone a ton of money. And again, many Germans view this as a dictated peace, right? They're being told what to do, there's lots of resentment, and again, that's going to flare back up in about 30 years. Now, throughout the rest of the world, there are different treaties that kind of end World War I. One of the things we see is that the map of Europe and the Middle East is redrawn. Again, if you look at a map of Europe pre-World War I with a map of Europe after World War I, you see there are way more countries, right? Places like Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Yugoslavia and all of these new countries that exist because of World War I. And again, that goes back to the idea of self-determination. Also, if you look at a map of the Middle East, again, what was once controlled completely by the Ottoman Empire, they're now on the losing side. All right, so again, their empire is going to be divided up and they become mandates. They're basically colonies of European countries. So France, Britain are all going to take chunks of the Middle East. Now, the ultimate goal of this peace agreement was to make sure that another world war never happened again. And the way in which they thought this would happen is by creating something called the League of Nations. This idea that if all the countries just interacted with each other, if we all came to agreements, if we all looked out for everyone's best interest, we're never going to fight a war with each other. In general, that sounds like a really good idea and maybe a way to prevent wars. But one thing to keep in mind is America doesn't join. We want to go back to being isolated. We don't want to be involved in international affairs. So again, America never actually joins the League of Nations, which again kind of weakens it. If you're not going to have arguably the most powerful country in the world involved, you lose some of that power to kind of prevent future conflicts from going on. So again, that is our look at World War I.